I'm Akasa, and here's where my story starts. I grew up in a small town, moving from one foster home to another until I landed with the Thompsons. They gave me something priceless, stability, something I craved all my young life. Life was plain until college. I was the first in my foster family to hit the big city for college. I studied languages, Japanese to be exact. I worked my butt off and got myself a translator job at an international trading company. It was a big deal for a small-town girl like me. One ordinary Tuesday, I walked into this cozy cafe near work, ordered my usual black coffee, and there he was, Jack. Tall with a smile that could knock you off your feet. He was on his phone, looking all business but relaxed. I caught his eye, and that was it. "Hey, never seen you here before," I said, trying to sound casual as I sat down with my coffee. He looked up, his smile widening. "Just trying to escape the office chaos." "I'm Jack," he replied, extending a hand. I shook it, feeling a spark. "I'm Ellie. So, what brings Mr. Escape the Office to my favorite spot?" "Good coffee and better company, it seems," he quipped. We hit it off from there. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and before we knew it, a year had passed. We were talking about more than just coffee. Jack was from the city, knew his way around, and had a charm that was hard to resist. But life's not all smooth sailing, right? We decided to tie the knot after a year of dating. I was over the moon, but wanted him to meet the folks who made me who I am, the Thompsons. My foster parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, were salt-of-the-earth types. They lived simply and worked hard. They were fixing up their house, so they rented this tiny apartment that was nothing to write home about. But it was warm and filled with love. I remember telling Jack, "It ain't much, but it's filled with good memories." He nodded, but I saw that look in his eyes as he scanned the cramped space. He was trying to hide it, but the man was uncomfortable. We spent the weekend there. My folks were thrilled and treated him like royalty, but Jack was off, always checking his watch, eager to head back. As we drove back to the city that Sunday night, the silence in the car was heavy. I had to say something. "Jack, you've been quiet." "What's up?" He sighed. "Look, Ellie, your folks are nice and all, but we come from different worlds, you know." His words stung, but I kept my cool. "And what's that supposed to mean?" "It's just different, Ellie. I'm not used to this simple life, but hey, it doesn't change how I feel about you," he added quickly, trying to smooth things over. I looked out the window, biting my lip, thinking about all the differences between my world and his. "Jack, I don't need fancy, but we got to respect where we both come from, right?" He nodded. "Right, of course. I love you, Ellie. That's what matters." His words were supposed to comfort me, but a part of me wondered if we were really seeing eye to eye. That night, I lay awake thinking about the simple life I cherished and the complicated world I was stepping into. Just a few days after our uncomfortable visit back home, it was my turn to meet the other side. Jack's mom, Vivian. A high-rise in the city center, her place was decked out in all sorts of fancy stuff that screamed money. When we arrived, she greeted us at the door, decked out in designer from head to toe, and her apartment was like walking into a magazine. "Ellie, is it? And what is it you do?" Vivian asked, sizing me up as if I were an item she was considering purchasing. "I'm a translator. I work with Japanese clients at a trading company," I replied, trying to sound confident. "Oh, impressive," she half smiled, but her eyes were doing another sweep, like she was looking for something off about me. Then it slipped out where I was from and about my foster parents. Her face twisted a bit. "From the province and fostered, you say? I don't think that's quite fitting for my Jack." Jack jumped in quick. "Mom, please. Ellie's wonderful, and I love her. We're getting married." That stirred up another pot. Married? And when is this happening? How are you planning it? Vivian's tone shifted to something a bit too curious. We're thinking something small, intimate. Just us in Hawaii, actually, I said, hoping she'd catch on to the romance of it all. Vivian's eyes nearly popped out. Hawaii? Just the two of you? No, that won't do. What will my friends think if I can't even throw my only son a proper wedding? I tried to keep my cool. It's our day, Vivian. We just want something true to us without all the fuss. That did it, she huffed. This discussion is over, and walked out of the room. Jack looked at me, apologetic, and whispered, "Let me talk to her. We'll sort this out." 4 months zipped by, and despite the rocky start, there we were in Hawaii. It was supposed to be just Jack and me, but Vivian showed up, camera in hand. Ready to document every second, every moment. It felt like she was there, lurking, making sure she had something to post online. Jack seemed oblivious, soaking in the sun and the ceremony. I tried to smile through it, whispering to him as we stood out on the beach. I thought it would be just us. He squeezed my hand. I know, I'm sorry. She's just excited, I guess. Let's just try to enjoy our day. Vivian was buzzing around us, her phone always up. Smile here. Oh, this'll look fabulous on my feed. I felt like a prop in her social media show, not a bride on her wedding day. It was our special day, but somehow it had turned into another one of Vivian's extravagances. Coming back home as newlyweds should have been all about those cozy, love-soaked days. You know, breakfast in bed, slow dances in the living room, that kind of stuff. And it was at least at first. Jack slipped this stunning ring on my finger the day we got back, the kind that catches the light and just won't quit sparkling. It's been in my family for generations, he told me, his eyes all lit up with something like pride. Be careful with that ring. It's more than just expensive. It's an heirloom, Vivian chimed in, hovering over us like some kind of dark cloud on a sunny day. Her reminder felt more like a warning, making my heart sink a bit. The first few weeks, Jack and I were in our little bubble, stealing kisses, making dinners together, the whole 9 yards. But then Vivian started dropping by unannounced all the time. It started one afternoon when I was folding laundry and the doorbell rang. There she was, Vivian, with that look on her face like she was about to inspect a military base. Just checking in on my favorite newlyweds, she said, but her eyes darted around like she was searching for something wrong. I tried to be polite, make small talk, even as she wandered into the kitchen, her fingers sliding over every surface. Ellie, darling, do you ever clean? And where are the fresh vegetables? A man needs his greens. Her tone was dripping with disapproval. Jack just shrugged it off when I told him later. She means well, babe. Just try to go with it. Go with it, I echoed, frustration bubbling up. Jack, she's treating me like I'm on trial in my own home. He kissed my forehead, all casual, like that was supposed to fix everything. She's lonely, Ellie. Let's just cut her some slack, okay? Slack turned into more slack until one day I got home late from work. We had just signed a huge contract with a new client from Japan, and I was buzzing with the thrill of it all. That is, until I found Vivian in my living room, an uninvited storm brewing. I heard you've been spending a lot of time at the office. Late nights, she raised an eyebrow, her voice thick with suspicion. Yeah, it's a big project. Lots of new opportunities, I tried to explain, but she had a different opinion. 2 days later, Vivian personally came to my office and began counting out loud the men working with me, loudly suggesting I could be having an affair with one of them. Then, without an invitation, she barged into my boss's office. Seeing he was already elderly, she loudly proclaimed, well, she definitely won't mess with the old man. I was mortified, my face red as a beetroot. I demanded she leave, apologizing profusely to my boss and colleagues for the disruption. Thankfully, my boss, Mr. Jackson, had a sense of humor and just laughed it off, but the damage was done. That night, I'd had enough. I cornered Jack in our bedroom, my voice low and tight. "Your mom crossed a line today, Jack. She's accusing me of cheating." He has to stop. He sighed, long and heavy. "Just try to get along, please." For me. But getting along felt more and more like putting up with nonsense. Things between Jack and me started getting rocky, partly due to Vivian always whispering in his ear. Lately, Jack had been picking apart everything about me, from the way I dressed to the hours I worked. He had never minded before, but suddenly everything was a problem. "Ellie, why do you have to wear that to work?" Jack frowned one morning as I got ready. It was just a blouse and skirt combo, nothing fancy. "It's professional, Jack. What's wrong with it?" I replied, adjusting my skirt. "It's too much. You're just inviting comments working with all those guys." His tone had an edge, and I knew this wasn't really about my clothes. That was becoming a regular thing now. It got worse on my birthday. My boss gave me a small gift, a book with a note that read, "To my practically daughter." It was innocent, a kind gesture, but Jack blew it out of proportion. "You see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Why is he giving you gifts? It's not right, Ellie." Jack was livid when he saw the book. "Jack, it's just a book. He's like a father figure to me." I tried to explain, but Jack's eyes were clouded with suspicion, all thanks to Vivian's constant meddling. All the tension made it a relief to escape when I headed out on a business trip to a neighboring city. Our company was setting up a new factory, and I was looking forward to the break from all the drama at home. The trip went well, and I was wrapping up with a dinner with our Japanese partners when I noticed shadows lurking near the restaurant. My heart raced. The street was dimly lit, but as I walked towards my hotel, the shadows moved closer. Panicked, I asked two colleagues to walk me back. As we neared the hotel entrance, the light from the lanterns revealed who was following me. Jack and Vivian. "What the hell, Jack? What are you doing here?" I blurted out, unable to hide my shock. Vivian stepped forward, her face twisted in anger. "We're making sure you're not up to no good. Can't trust you around all these men, can we?" My colleagues were staring, and I felt my face burn with embarrassment. Trying to calm the situation, I said, "This is ridiculous. You're both acting like I'm some kind of criminal." I exclaimed, but Vivian wasn't having it. "I'll be telling your parents about this. They should know what kind of woman you've turned out to be," she retorted. I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. "Go ahead, tell them. They'll laugh you out of town." The ride back was a silent one. Jack and his mother sat in the front, and I was alone in the back seat, staring out the window. The city lights blurred into streaks of color as tears filled my eyes. I was married to the man I loved, but it felt like I was trapped in a bad dream, with Vivian as the relentless nightmare that wouldn't end. Vivian had actually gone through with her threat and showed up at my parents' place. I couldn't believe it when Mom called me, her voice shaking as she recounted what had just happened. "She was here, Ellie," Mom said, her voice strained. "She demanded to see your father right away, so I gave her the address to his workshop." I felt my stomach drop. Dad was at his workshop, where he spent most of his days crafting and creating in his element. Mom continued, "Your mother-in-law went there, saw your father in his work clothes all stained from the glass, and she just scoffed." I gripped the phone tighter, bracing myself. "When your father went over to greet her, he apologized for not shaking her hand. His were all stained from work, you know." She looked at his hands, Ellie made a face, and said something awful about coming to this backwater for nothing. My heart sank as I listened. "She said she understands now why you turned out the way you did, and just left without another word." Thanks for telling me, Mom. I need to think about what to do. I hung up, feeling a mix of anger and hurt swirling inside. It wasn't long before Vivian made her next move. The very next day, she cornered me in the living room, her eyes cold and judgmental. Ellie, now I see where you get your manners, or should I say lack thereof. Your father, an ordinary worker, his hands permanently dirtied. What kind of upbringing, what kind of manners, could you possibly teach any children? I shudder to think. Her words were like daggers, but before I could respond, Jack walked in. Instead of defending me, he went straight to his mother, taking her in his arms. Mom, I'm sorry about all this. Ellie's family, they're just different from us. That was it, the last straw. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Different? Is that your way of saying my family isn't good enough for your high standards? My voice broke, the hurt too deep. Jack looked at me, his eyes empty. It's just how things are, Ellie. We come from different worlds. So that's it, huh? My voice rose, thick with emotion. If I'm such a disgrace, why don't we just end this? If I'm so below you, let's get a divorce. Vivian's eyes lit up almost gleefully. Well, that sounds like a splendid idea. Jack just nodded passively. Maybe that's for the best. I spent the night in our guest room, tears streaming down my face. Every word Vivian said replayed in my mind. Every dismissive glance from Jack. The man I thought I knew, the life I thought we were building, it was all a lie. The early morning light filtered through the blinds, casting a soft glow across the room as I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. It was time to make some difficult but necessary calls. First on my list was my boss, Mr. Jackson, whose kindness had always made the stresses of work bearable. Mr. Jackson, it's Ellie, I started, my voice a bit shaky. I'm facing some personal issues and need to take some time off. I can take it unpaid if necessary. Ellie, he replied quickly, his voice laced with concern. You're one of our most valuable team members. Take a paid vacation, sort things out, and come back when you're ready. We'll manage here. His generosity brought a lump to my throat. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. I can't tell you how much this means to me. Next, I dialed my mother, who had always been my anchor in any storm. As soon as she answered, I spilled everything, the words tumbling out in a torrent of emotion. Mom, it's all falling apart here. I can't do this anymore. Jack and his mom, it's just too much. Her voice was calm, soothing. Ellie, we've been prepared for this call. Your father and I are on our way. Just pack what you need. As I ended the call, I glanced around the room, my eyes landing on the few personal items I'd brought into this house, none of which felt like they belonged. I started packing, each item a reminder of the life I thought I'd build with Jack. Vivian appeared at the doorway, her presence like a dark cloud. Remember, Ellie, only take what you bought with your own money. Don't think about grabbing anything else, she said, her voice cold and accusing. It wasn't long before I heard the gravel crunch under the tires of an old vehicle. Looking out the window, I saw the familiar beat-up pickup truck that belonged to my parents. Jack and Vivian followed me outside, their expressions a mixture of smugness and curiosity. As my parents' truck pulled up, Jack scoffed loudly. Sure that old thing will even make it back. My father, a quiet strength emanating from him, stepped out and faced Jack without a word. He handed over the divorce papers, his eyes steady and unwavering. Jack grabbed the papers and signed them with a smirk, his mother chuckling beside him. Glad to be rid of this mess, he muttered. We arrived at my parents' home, a large, imposing structure that felt more like a sanctuary now. I spent the next few hours unpacking and trying to settle my nerves. The peace of the familiar surroundings slowly calmed me. That evening, as I sat looking out at the garden, my phone rang. It was Vivian. Ellie, you need to return the ring. It's a family heirloom, not a parting gift. I held the phone away for a moment, taking a deep breath before responding. Vivian, that ring was given to me as a wedding gift. If you want it, come and get it yourself. The morning light was just beginning to spill over the horizon when I saw them from the upstairs window. Jack and his mother. Vivian stood at the gate, staring up at the house as if they had stumbled into a fairy tale. Their expressions of disbelief were almost comical. I watched from behind the curtain, a smirk playing on my lips. They looked so out of place against the backdrop of the large, meticulously landscaped front yard, their confusion palpable. Finally, I turned away from the window, hearing the sounds of my parents downstairs. I joined them, and we shared a knowing look before stepping outside. My parents were calm and collected as they walked past Jack and Vivian without a word, heading straight for the garage. They pretended not to notice the bewildered stares from my estranged husband and his mother. As the garage door swung open, revealing the sleek lines of 3 high-end cars, I could hear the sharp intake of breath from Jack. My father chose a gleaming black sedan, and we all climbed in. Just as we were about to pull out onto the driveway, Jack found his voice. "Axa, what is all this? This house, these cars?" I stepped out of the car, walking over to them with a calm I hadn't felt in months. "This is my family home, Jack. My father owns a glass factory and several commercial properties. This is where I grew up." Vivian's face contorted with confusion and disbelief. But your father, he was wearing work clothes. His hands were dirty." I couldn't help but smile at her naivety. "Yes, Vivian. He was launching a new product line. It's a tradition in his company to get involved hands-on. It doesn't mean he's not successful or wealthy." They stood there, stunned, unable to reconcile the image of the hard-working man they'd seen with the opulence around them. At that moment, a group of our neighbors approached, their faces bright with smiles. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. We heard about your latest charity event. It's wonderful what you're doing. You've got our support in the mayoral elections, you know," one of them called out cheerfully. My parents nodded and thanked them. Jack's face was a mixture of awe and regret, his eyes darting between his mother and me. Vivian looked like she had swallowed something bitter, her earlier arrogance washed away by the undeniable reality in front of her. I turned back to the car, giving Jack and his mother one last look. "Well, I guess you see things a little differently now," I said, not unkindly. Their expressions, a mix of shock and realization, were all the confirmation I needed that the past, with all its hardships and heartaches, was finally behind me. The morning's revelations hadn't even settled when Jack made his move. He shoved his mother aside with such force that she stumbled. "It's all your fault, you know. You pushed her away with your nonsense," he shouted at her, his words laced with bitterness. Then turning to me, his demeanor changed completely. He rushed over, trying to pull me into an embrace, his hands reaching out as if trying to erase everything with a simple touch. "Ellie, please listen to me. We were good together, weren't we? I love you. I really do," he pleaded, his voice a desperate whisper. I recoiled from his touch, the warmth we once shared long extinguished by his betrayal. "Stop, Jack, just stop," I said firmly, pushing him away with all the strength I could muster. I quickly got into the car, my heart pounding. My father, without a word, pressed the remote control, and the garage doors began to close behind us. Jack and his mother stood there, calling out, their voices a blend of desperation and disbelief. "Ellie, please forgive us. We didn't mean any of it," Jack yelled, his voice cracking under the strain. Vivian, scrambling on the ground for the dignity she'd lost, joined in. "Ellie, my dear, I was wrong. Please." As we drove away, the finality of the moment weighed on me, but a part of me needed closure. A definitive end to this chapter of my life. As we reached the end of the driveway, I asked my father to stop the car. Jack, thinking this was his chance, ran up to the car, his face lit up with hope. His mother, a few paces behind, tried to catch up, her earlier elegance replaced by desperation. Without a word, I rolled down the window, pulled the wedding ring from my finger, and held it out for a brief moment. Jack's eyes widened as he realized what was about to happen. "This is where it ends, Jack," I said, my voice steady. With that, I threw the ring out of the window. It glittered briefly in the morning sun before landing on the soft grass beside the road. Jack's mother, ever the opportunist, rushed to where the ring had fallen, her hands scrambling through the grass. I rolled up the window, shutting out their pleas and the painful past they represented. "Let's go, Dad," I said quietly. 2 weeks later, I was back in the city, in a new apartment that felt more like home than I'd felt in a long time. I returned to work, where Mr. Jackson welcomed me with open arms and a gentle understanding that eased my transition back into routine. Jack made several attempts to contact me, each more desperate than the last. He claimed to have cut ties with his mother, begging for another chance. But some things, once broken, can't be mended. I told him it was over for good this time and blocked his number. No more words were needed.